how to choose an intentional word of the year. For well over a decade, I've been doing the word of the year thing. In 2021, my word was intentional. And a funny thing happened. I was getting a lot of hits on that post on my blog, but not, sadly, because people were so interested in my word. No, people were interested in choosing an intentional word of the year. For good reason. Choosing an intentional word for the year is not only fun, but inspiring and aspirational. So, as this old year winds down and a new one is on the horizon, I decided it may be helpful to write a bit about the practice, not just about my word in particular. So, what is an intentional word of the year? Well, some people make New Year's resolutions, and that's great. I've done those many years, because there's something about writing out my goals and decisions that makes me want to stick to them more than some vague, maybe I'll mental goal. But resolutions aren't for everyone, and they're not for every year. Still, as the calendar turns over, many of us want to recognize that this new year is something new. We want to set down in writing something to guide us through the 12 months to come. So, if we're not doing resolutions, what do we do? An alternative to New Year's resolutions is a word of the year. It can also just be an addition to New Year's resolutions if you want to set both goals and something to govern them. In general, an intentional word of the year is when you choose a word that is meant to be your inspiration, aspiration, hope, goal, or motivation that will underscore everything for you in the year to come. Maybe it's meant to remind you of your faith in God's promises. Maybe it's meant to help you focus. Maybe it's meant to reassure you throughout the year or inspire you to something greater. Whatever your particular need or purpose, choosing a word can help you make decisions, keep your eyes on the proverbial prize, and motivate you to keep going through challenging times. So, how to choose an intentional word of the year? Once you've decided to choose a word, that leaves an important question. How? When I first started out, I had in my head that this word had to be something directly from God, not something from my own mind. So I would start praying about it, maybe a week in advance, maybe more, and then just wait for a word to hit me. Sometimes it did, in a song, in my Bible reading, in my prayer, in my daily conversations. But sometimes it didn't. God being silent, my heart not listening, I have no idea. But I did notice that the years I had a word to guide me were years when I made better choices, when I clung more tightly to His promises, when I kept my focus more on His kingdom and less on my little empire. I wanted to have a word. I wanted to have a word every year. And finally, I realized I didn't have to wait for one to come to me. I could choose a word. Okay, so I actually did not realize this from my own brilliance. Actually, my best friend and critique partner, Stephanie Morrill, always chooses a word deliberately. I eventually decided she had the right idea. So instead of waiting for a bolt from the blue, I started being deliberate about my choice. There are, of course, still many options for how to pick. You can make a list. The first and obvious way is to simply start making a list. Focus on where you feel you need to work or focus in the year to come, and then just jot down different words that fall into that space. For instance, the year I chose intentional for my word, I'd started with a list of things I knew needed my attention, like rest, organization, time management, focus on prayer, time with my family. Once I had a list of things that I wanted to pay attention to, I looked for the through line and words that could capture that. Intentional was a fairly obvious choice for me that time. It was the one word that would govern all those things. I had to be intentional about everything from taking enough breaks to making smart use of my space. Chances are good that your list from year to year will have a lot of the same themes, but hopefully you'll be ever growing, so some items will fall off and new ones will come. You'll also be exiting and entering new seasons of life. And as you do, you'll find that your list needs to reflect that. Maybe you'll be balancing a new baby, or kids going to school, or kids leaving the house. Maybe it'll be sorting through belongings before a big downsize, or choosing a new career, or finally working on that dream project you've been thinking about for years. Whatever season you're in, Embrace that and make your list, and hence your word choice reflect it. Do an internet search. If you're still coming up blank or don't feel like making a list, you are in luck. Plenty of people have already done it for you. And you can always do an internet search for a list of good word of the year choices and pick one that resonates with you. So you can just search for word of the year generator yourself and see if you find a site that aligns with your goals and your word view. And in the show notes, I will provide some links to some sites that I found with generators for you. Next, pray and listen. If you're a person of faith, you certainly can use the method I used for years, which was to pray for inspiration for a word and then seek it through that prayer. Scripture reading, church attendance, etc. As different words resonate with you, write them down. Sit with them for a while and see if they really capture something you need to focus on in the year to come. Sometimes a word will hit you so strongly that you just know, and other times you may not be certain at first. So it becomes a matter of which ones stick with you for a few days. Once I've selected a word, then what? So you have figured out which word you want to choose for the year to come. Great! But now what do you do with it? I'm a writer, so my first instinct is always write it down. But my bias aside, I think that's actually a pretty good instinct. Writing it down, whether in a notebook, on a sticky note, on an index card, in a word processing doc, a social media or blog post, whatever, that's going to help cement it in your mind and heart. And it also gives you a place to go back to on that day 9 months from now when you can't even remember why you went into the kitchen, much less what word you chose last December or January. So write it down somewhere. Put it in a place where you can't lose it. If you choose a physical place to write it, tape it somewhere. If digital, bookmark it or put a digital pin in it. If you're artsy, consider making a pretty image with the word, which you can then display. Or see if you can find a fun notebook or journal with the word on the front to inspire you throughout the year. If you enjoy journaling or other writing, write a paragraph or a page or a post about why the word resonated with you, how you hope it will guide you in the year to come. The idea here is to keep the word present. You want to contemplate this word frequently throughout the year. So either put it somewhere that you'll see it regularly, or consider setting yourself reminders to revisit that will pop up on your calendar. If you've written about it, schedule a few times throughout the year to reread what you've written. At the end or a beginning of a quarter or a season is a great time. So here are some intentional word of the year suggestions. If you don't feel like visiting a generator or quiz tool and just want to browse a list, that can be a great way to see quickly what resonates with you and what doesn't. So in the show notes, you will find a link to my post where you can find a list of hundreds of possible word choices, as well as links to some of my past words of the year and reflections upon them.